Okay, let's get into assimilating containers and container technology. I'm going to go ahead and get started here and present my screen. Let's go ahead and do that. All right, so I'm going to start with this Python template. I'm going to build off of it. So I'm going to use this template, and I'm going to go here, and we'll call this container template. I'll probably be working a lot with containers. I want a container config here, containers template. All right, got this thing going. It should build pretty quick. I'm also going to tell the code spaces to pre-build, get that thing cooking. Great. All right, so one of the big things I think that happens when people are hearing the word container, it's like, hey, what is a container? Why do I care about it? So we're just going to really quickly go through some basic container stuff, and every couple of weeks I'll do a new tip on containers. The first thing we're going to do is just set up this environment. Now, while this is building and everything's working, I'm going to go ahead and grab some other code that I think would be useful. And I think it's in here. US. Yeah, so I have some good container code right here, which is a super tiny container. And then I also, here we go, tiny container demo. That's the one I want to do. So I'm gonna walk through this, which is I think is a good first lesson. Is let's just take the simplest possible thing we could do, which is a command line tool in Bash, and let's turn it into a containerized application, and then play around with some of the things that you can do with that. So that's the core concept. As this thing's getting built here, we'll be able to launch it and use it for this particular environment. All right, looks like it's getting ready to run. Good. So a few other things to point out here in terms of building containers would be you need, you actually don't need any source code at all. You could just start with a Docker file. And the idea with a Docker file is it defines the runtime that you're going to play around with. And in particular, this is a very tiny runtime, which I think is kind of fun to play around with. And that's why we're going to start with this. But I could actually create lots of different containers and test out different ideas. So that's really the idea with a container, is that you're going to set up your own runtime and add something to it, and then you can distribute it to other people or to yourself. And this is I think one of the best first demos to play around with. So as soon as this thing spins up here, what I'll do is I'll run it inside of this environment and build my container. And then later in further lessons, we can go into pushing containers into, let's say, Docker Hub, or pushing them into ECR, Amazon's container registry, or to another cloud registry. But again, the first idea here is to just get this thing running here locally. So it looks like it's just doing a little bit more installation here, but it's almost done. Okay, looks like it's doing that. Okay, got this thing about to launch. So again, this is really shows why the pre-configured code spaces here are so good, because they allow you to launch very quickly. All right, so we got this environment set up. I'm going to just change a little bit. So we're going to call this template template for container projects. Let's get rid of this stuff here. Let's get rid of all this stuff. And the first thing to start out with is to make a directory called tiny container here. And then let's just put some stuff inside of here. So we'll cd into it. And then we'll grab this Docker file. So really, you just need a Docker file. That's the main thing to create a container and the runtime so you can run it. But let's create that Docker file. So we'll say touch Docker file. And there we go. There we go. So we're going to use Alpine, which is a tiny one, tiny container runtime. And then we can go to here. We can grab a small little command tool. And let's go ahead and do that. So we'll call this heat sh. Go ahead and make it executable. There we go. And if we say repeat foo, it would be 3. There you go. So it just repeats something a few different times. And then if I go and I add some documentation for this, we can see the different things that we would do. So we'll just add a little README file as well. And so we'll say touch readme.md. All right. So what we can do now is, if I wanted to push it to Docker Hub, I can push it to Docker Hub. But what I really care about is actually running it locally here. So let's go ahead and build it by typing in Docker build. So we'll do that. We'll say Docker build. And so this is going to look inside of the current working directory, and it's going to build a container. There we go. And now what's fun about this is if I type in Docker image ls, you can see it's tiny, right? Like it's only 10 megabytes. So this is running a Linux operating system that I can actually play around with now. And so all I would need to do is just is log into it. So if I say this, if I say Docker run, and I put in the image ID, it should drop me right in. There we go. And check that out. Now I've got this app inside of here, and I can do the same thing I did before. It is run it like that. So that's one way you could do things, and you can just see like, look, it's even got a top command, and I mean, so it's basically a complete little sandbox for me to play around with stuff. If I wanted to create a file, you know, like we could create a file, you know, do all kinds of stuff inside of here. But once I get out of it and I exit, if I log back into that same container, the file is not there anymore. So it's essentially like recreates everything the way it lived before, which is actually kind of cool because it means that I can use it as a sandbox. Now, the other thing I could do as well is I could push this into some other repository. Like if I wanted to go to Docker Hub, for example, go here, this, and I go to Docker Hub right here, I can push this directly into this location and other people can use it. In fact, I already did do this, and we can take a look at this. If I go here and I want to try a version of this, we could go over here, get out of this directory, and I could say, just run the command. Say Docker pull. There you go. And now if I do Docker image ls, there's going to be another one. There we go. And now if I want to run that same command, Docker run, I can pass in the exact name here, like that. And if I wanted to, I can even invoke it without even going into the shell. There we go. So this is a great little tip to be aware of. If you want to write a little tool and keep it fresh and doesn't have problems, or distribute to somebody else, you can actually go through here, build something with Alpine, like a very small script here, distribute it, push it to Docker Hub, and you're good to go. All right. Well, that's a good start for Assimilate Containers, and I'll see you in a couple weeks.